Welcome. I'm David Malloy. I lead talent consulting and transformation at Findem. Thrilled to be here today with our friends at Greenhouse and with all of you. If you've joined the webinar today, you're probably thinking about a few things like how to unlock more value from your existing talent pools, how you can reduce manual sourcing work, and you may be wondering how you can better make your data work for you. And that's where we come in. So Findem is the only talent data platform powered by 3D data and with AI. We call it our talent data cloud. Okay, so a lot to look at in this slide. This is an end-to-end process on the left. So you're going to orient from left to right. In purple is what Findem focuses on, and green is what Greenhouse focuses on. So if I start at the far left with multi-channel sourcing, what does that mean? It simply means you've got candidates coming to you from a variety of different sources. We consolidate all of those sources into one view. We also provide CRM, market intel, and analytics. And at the point of application, Greenhouse picks it up and follows it through tracking, interview planning, offers, and all the way through onboarding. So I think what's great about the partnership with Greenhouse is this allows you to attract and engage talent faster, smarter, more efficiently, and with a higher rate of confidence in your hires. Okay, so today what we're here to show you is what's possible when your sourcing strategy is built for the AI era and how talent rediscovery can give you and your teams a competitive edge. All right, we're joined by a great group today. We have Nkem Wankwa from Greenhouse. We have Matt Beck, my teammate at Findem. And joining us from Box is David Moore. So if you would each take a moment to introduce yourself, please. Nkem.
Thanks, David. Hey, everyone. I'm Nkem Wankwa, and I'm the Group Product Manager of Applied Machine Learning, as well as Ecosystem at Greenhouse. And I'm calling in from Dallas, Texas.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's great to be here today. I am Matt Beck, Principal Value Consultant of Analytics and Reporting here at Findem. I cultivate confidence in our platform through practitioner-led enablement and consulting. My primary skill set lies in translating analytics into actionable insight. Thrilled to be here today.
And hey, everyone, I'm David Moore. I lead the talent organization at Box. We're a Silicon Valley located software company, and I'm based right here in the Bay Area. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina. If you enjoy gray skies and rain, this is a great place to be this week. Okay, so a few housekeeping items before we jump into the conversation. Today's session will run for about 45 minutes. We are recording the webinar and we'll share the replay after, so no need to take manual notes. And then in terms of any questions, please feel free to drop into the Q&A box at any point, and we will address a few of them at the end of the session today. All right, thank you so much. Okay, let's jump into it with Nkem. Starting with this, problem number one. So what problems are people seeing with sourcing?
All right, thanks, David. That's a really good question. I just want to start with the number one problem, and I know everyone on this call is very, very aware of this one. Basically, you post a job and you get thousands of candidates in the first week, and that just leaves your team completely overwhelmed there. So that's a really big one. The next problem that we generally see is re-engaging really good previous candidates. So you already took time to interview these candidates. Some of them you know really, really well because you've been through multiple rounds with them and you thought that they were good candidates, but they didn't get the offer the first time. But they were very strong silver medalists, bronze medalists, all of that, right? You definitely see them working at the company. They just didn't make it the first time. And the thing is, at the end of the day, you want efficiency. So why would you not take a look at candidates that you've already vetted, that you've already taken time to get to know, and that you have given the rubber stamp of approval there? So that's really the second problem that we see. Then finally, third, this is a very interesting one here. We are seeing a bunch of candidate fraud in certain positions. Basically, candidates are claiming roles and projects that they never actually had or they never participated in. Then even worse than that, candidates are making completely fake profiles to infiltrate companies. It's really a crazy time when you think about it.
Yeah, so I think you touched on a few things. Experience is impacted with that super high volume of candidates, especially if they're not addressed. We were talking the other day about the stats around a silver medalist candidate, and they're somewhere that they are somewhere between 10 to 15 times more likely to get hired than a brand new applicant. And as it relates to fraud, it is absolutely everywhere. I was asked by a colleague at Findem if I knew somebody who worked at my previous company. He said he lives in the town next to you. So I looked him up. It was an executive director in my town next door. Never heard of him, never worked for the company I was part of. So it's prevalent today. So next, can you maybe touch on the Greenhouse Findem partnership from your perspective? What's it look like? How does it work?
Yeah, I can definitely quickly touch on that. So Findem, y'all are one of Greenhouse's premier sourcing partners, very, very just spotlighted there. We've been partners since 2022, actually, so 3 years plus. And we have an integration that pushes qualified candidates that are found via Findem into Greenhouse so they can enter the interview process and they can go through the structured hiring process there.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And we kind of saw some of the ROI from that partnership on the previous slide. Can you talk about your vision for kind of how we tackle these problems that we talked about together?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a big passion of mine. So to start, we probably need a baseline understanding of each platform. On the Greenhouse side, Greenhouse Recruiting, it's a full service ATS that specializes, like I said before, in structured hiring. And then on the Findem side, Findem's a highly advanced sourcing platform that gets you the perfect candidate at the top of the funnel at the right time. So when you think about it, let's step into Greenhouse for a little bit here. Greenhouse has a lot of sourcing capabilities, but the majority of them are focused at the time of the application. If a candidate applies, we're going to parse their resume and extract their skills for filtering. But as of today, that candidate is going to be a snapshot of when they first applied. So this means that 2-3 years from now, we're still going to be seeing that snapshot there. On the Findem side, they have an insane amount of filters that help narrow down to the perfect set of candidates and prospects that keep them enriched in real time. So what this means for you is that you can keep track of the progress of a candidate that applied to, for example, the software engineer position 3 years ago and discern whether they're actually senior now. So you get to track that advancement in their careers. Then honestly, I've seen this firsthand. So speaking personally, when I was introduced to Findem, the level of detail on my own profile caught me off guard. So for example, I used to work at Calendly, maybe a few jobs ago, and they actually knew what features were released while I was there, as well as the growth that Calendly actually went through. So that was really impressive. So to be able to filter candidates down to that level of detail is basically unparalleled in the industry right now.
Yeah, so enriching the data, keeping it fresh, used engineering as an example. I remember one of the very first demos I saw of Findem. We could actually see what patents were filed. So if somebody joined you or you had them in the database 3 years ago, they could have applied for patents. They could have done a lot of things, gotten certification. So what we're doing is we're layering that data on top of what's in the database. That's where the value is. Okay, awesome. Hey, thank you so much for walking us through that. Let's pivot for a moment. And let's talk about how that vision is rolling out across our customers. Also, a quick question from the audience. Are you seeing the slides that we're walking through? We've got a note saying somebody cannot see the content. Oh, we can't see it.
Oh,
All right. Well, you're missing some good stuff. All right. Kelly, you can see it now? We can see the picture? Okay, fine. Yeah, so the part that we just had where we talked to NCAM, that was just his face. We didn't have slides for that, so I think we may be okay. All right, moving on to Matt. So let me kind of set the stage for this. So I know, Matt, for you and for a lot of folks in the audience, it's not a secret that many of the best candidates are the ones that are closest to us. These are the ones found in what we call warm channels. Can you walk us through what that looks like?
absolutely. So what I have here is a listing and a grouping here of these warm channels, and each of these are going to be in purple here. And so these are those that have some particular connection or value, these candidates coming from these channels that lead them to be more of an optimal channel of outreach. And so you think about, we talked about these inbound applicants, the ones that are coming through. The ability for you to see which ones are the best matches for the role, right, is something that Findem is able to unlock for you. I'm going to talk a bit more about these past applicants, but this is definitely a major treasure trove when you're looking for the right candidates who have the right level of engagement. You also can be thinking about those that are in talent pools, or if you're using a CRM, right, the prospects within your CRM. You have referrals or employee connections, folks that have had prior, have worked together with some of these folks that maybe work at your company now, or those that are being referred. You have your internal employees, so those that are in your company right now that end up being an ideal match for a role you're currently hiring for. Then you have alumni, for those of you that are employing boomerang strategies to bring people back. Being able to identify that makes this a valuable channel as well. And so these are all opposed, right, to then candidates that you're just finding within these cold channels. So this direct sourcing that we've been talking about, that's an example of this cold channel, where you're really just reaching out to them potentially for the first time. And unfortunately, most recruiting teams don't have the tools necessary to identify these candidates quickly, right, let alone engage them at scale. And that's ultimately where Findem changes the game. We actually did a study across all of our customers to understand how these channels perform against each other with our multi-channel sourcing solution.
Okay, awesome. We've got some slides. Hopefully everybody will be able to see those. But Matt, please walk us through the study and tell us what stood out to you.
Absolutely, happy to do it. So I'm going to share some of the insights that came out of our 2025 State of Sourcing Channel Performance. This was done across a wide swath of outreach that was performed via the Findem platform by our customer base, and encompasses the outreach that existed from calendar year 2024 across 127 countries. And really, the question that this helped us to answer, right, or what are the kind of results that talent acquisition teams can expect from a multi-channel approach to sourcing? So finding number one, top line for you all to see here, is that these warm channels are driving better ROI than external sourcing. So let me break this down for you a bit. When we talk about ROI here, there are two measures that we're deploying as we evaluate this. And the first is using reply rate, and the second is interest rate. Reply rate in this case, we can use as a proxy for candidate engagement, regardless of the outcome. So if they are replying that they are interested, if they're replying they're not interested. And then interested is specifically looking at the rate of individuals who, from all those you've contacted, who are the ones that ultimately expressed interest. And so what I have visualized on the right side here are the relative lifts associated with these measures of performance relative to this direct or external sourcing as the primary channel of contact versus what's been achieved in lift as you look to what's occurred with internal employees, those connections, so we had referrals listed there, alumni or boomerang, and then finally ATS candidates, these rediscovered folks up on the top. And what you'll see here, right, is what I'm going to dive into a bit more of, is really the results that come from these ATS folks who are using ATS rediscovery. So to really hammer it home, right, what do we mean by ATS rediscovery? NChem's touched on it, David's touched on it in the beginning. It's a central part of the value add of a tool like Findem. And it's that these are those candidates that already exist in your ATS with Greenhouse, right? That their profiles are then being refreshed and brought up to date using Findem, right, as the platform to provide that data. And so when we really just isolate the types of outcomes that we're seeing from folks that are part of this ATS rediscovery channel, what we're seeing is that we see lifts in reply rate of 138%. We see lifts to contact to interest of 188%, and a 37% reduction in time to reply, meaning that these folks are the ones that are more engaged, more likely to be interested, and take less time to get back to you. Definitely ideal when performing candidate outreach. There's also a number of ways that we've broken this out further to better assess where the greatest impact is found and what kinds of candidates are those that are particularly engaged with or particularly showing some level of interest or engagement that's beyond what we see from just looking at the broader population. So one insight to share is that we found that ATS rediscovery has had a greater impact in recruiting women. And this, what we've seen is that if we actually break out these lifts in reply and interest rate and look at it from a candidate demographic perspective, that's where we see that women actually overperform both in reply rate and in interest, looking at all of those contacted in the period. We can also break this out from a regional perspective. So if we look at North America, APAC, EMEA, and Latin America, what we see is that the places where we see the highest amount of lift, right, are within North America for reply, as well as for interest lift, but we see things in the right direction across the board in all of these regions. So then there's another lens to look at it, right, which is the type of customer that you are, right? And in terms of your wider industry, what kinds of candidates, right? What types of outreach in different industries? How does that all factor in? And that's where we're also able to see some really compelling results and where you can see that ATS Rediscovery provides an edge in what typically is a pretty competitive industry. So I want to flag a couple of things that really spiked for us, right? So looking at those in data security software products, a very competitive field for recruiting. Look at human resources services, I imagine pretty relevant for a number of folks on this call. And even in areas that maybe you'd consider more non-traditional to the classic, like business tech or SaaS use case, right? And so primary and secondary education, we've seen some amazing results, and especially in interest rate for customers in that bucket there. And so that's the data points that I came to share today. Very excited to see things in the way that they're trending. What I'll do now is really just take a second, look to see if there's been any additional questions or things that people have posted from here. I think so far we're good on that front. But David, I'm curious, is there anything you want me to just touch a bit more on within this?
Yeah, a couple things stand out for me, even between NChem's presentation and yours as well, is a kind of this experience thread that weaves through everything. So from a candidate, so I look at things from a candidate perspective, from a hiring manager perspective, but also from a recruiter perspective. So being able to be discovered easier obviously has positive impact on a candidate. A better hire, obviously, all day long for the hiring manager, as well as a more efficient process. But I think what kind of grabs my attention is the reply versus the interest rate. So to be interested is one thing, but to get a response is another. And from a candidate experience, right, that provides a much better experience for them just to close the loop. And as you kind of touched on before, it may not be a yes, I'm interested, but it may be a response just letting them know thank you or thank you not at this time. So I think that's pretty powerful to have experience kind of weave through all the different participants in the recruiting process. Awesome. Matt, thank you so much. I think I always say the numbers don't lie. So you've seen a pretty compelling case with the numbers to support it, why Rediscovery should be a part, if not a major part, of your talent strategy. So thanks again very much for that. Okay, we're going to shift gears again. You've heard the vision, you've seen the data to back it up. What's it look like in the real world, though? So very pleased to be joined by David Moore from Box. He and his team are doing some really incredibly strategic work around rediscovery and warm channels. David, thank you so much for being here with us today. And I'm going to go ahead and kick it off with this question. Can you give us some context on the kinds of challenges you were seeing before you had Findem?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. And thanks again for having me here. But yeah, I mean, we had a very long-term partnership with LinkedIn. As you can imagine, it's been the sort of dominant platform that most recruiting teams have used over the last sort of several decades. And we were just finding that the cost was spiraling and becoming fairly prohibitive. I sort of got my marching orders from my CFO to say, is there anything we can do to get this, get this cost down? And for a long time, my answer was simply no, that if we wanted to be taken seriously as a team, I had to give my team the tools to be able to do the job. But then, in the last couple of years with so much, advancement and disruption in the space, we started looking for tools that we felt could be a viable alternative to LinkedIn. And that was where we encountered Findem. So yeah, that was the genesis of it. And then, at the same time, I think as a team, we've always worked pretty hard to try and see if we could stay ahead of the curve and just take advantage of some of the new technology that's out there. So yeah, initially our overarching goals were, number one, to see if we could drive some costs to the bottom line of our business, cost savings, I should say. Number two, just stay ahead of the curve in terms of recruiting tech, because there's just so much going on in the space. And then number three, see if we could leverage tools to drive more efficiencies to our recruiters and just help them get things done faster.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so this one is kind of a multi-part question. So if you would, can you kind of walk us through the solve? Specifically, how did the solution work with the existing use of Greenhouse? And then any learnings along the way, any words of advice you can share with the folks in the audience?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, we've been a Greenhouse customer for a long time, since 2017, I think. And at the time when we first started talking to Findem, we just renewed our agreement with them. So it was obviously going to be essential that any new tool interface well with Greenhouse. Otherwise, you're always struggling and up against it. And yeah, Greenhouse's APIs, open APIs made this really a non-issue for us. So that was great. I think, I've learned a lot of lessons over my years in TA, just around kind of onboarding tools, and some tools that we've rolled out that have gone incredibly well, some that have not gone so well. I think the single best decision we made was to sort of frankly take our time and partner really closely with the Findem team and invest the time that we needed to do a detailed pilot of the tool. So yeah, you talked about, here I am out in the wild. I wanted to see this tool out in the wild. And so we basically did a full kind of limited deployment of the tool to make sure we'd really tested all parts of the functionality and could see with data, how the tool was performing and how it was becoming part of our recruiters' workflow on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I think I've tested a lot of tools, and often you'll just get, demos that, make everything look great. And then you get given a sandbox environment, which is artificial. But yeah, no, we basically bought a bunch of licenses, and we gave them to 7 or 8 recruiters on the team for at least, I think, 5 months, maybe 6 months. And then we closely tracked the results of that pilot. Because I mean, the bottom line is, changing recruiter behavior can be challenging. Recruiters, I've been a recruiter myself for many years, and recruiters will have their own style and their habits, and getting them to change behavior is really hard. So I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned was, when you're rolling out new tools, you've got to make sure your team is bought in, and therefore willing to engage and adopt the tool. And running this pilot meant that I had a number of key members of my organization who had really thoroughly tested the product from front to back. They'd been given the opportunity to share feedback, and that really made them feel part of the decision, as opposed to kind of leadership sort of deciding something and pushing it down to them. It also meant that when we came to roll out the tool more broadly across the team, I then had 6 or 7 essentially super users sprinkled throughout my organization that could really help the rest of the team get up and running. Because you can run enablement sessions and give people a manual, but often we all know what happens, right? They'll start using it for a couple of weeks, and if it doesn't land and they don't love it, they'll move on and just abandon it again. So yeah, I mean, I think. And again, it's definitely worth saying that, as we went into this pilot, our number one use case initially was just seeing if we could find a tool that was a viable alternative to LinkedIn. But then, as Cam and Matt have talked about, one thing we discovered as we went through the pilot was that Findem also has a ton of other value in terms of the candidate rediscovery that we found really valuable as well.
Yeah, so change management is tough, especially when there's been a predominant tool out there for a long time, and it's just kind of what everyone is accustomed to. So driving the accountability and a plan around it
Yep.
is really smart. And when you think about the evolution of technology, some of us started our careers out faxing resumes, and we had filing cabinets, right? And you look at what it's turned into today, and it kind of struck me that maybe for the first time ever, instead of recruiters, hating their tools, maybe it's a retention mechanism. When you take a look at how sophisticated this combination is from a recruiter perspective, I think it'd be really hard to kind of going back and doing it the old way. With all of the, the
I'm
automation.
embarrassed to say that I too started my career next to a fax machine. So yeah, thanks for that.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your success. What are the outcomes that you're the most proud of?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, it's still early days, but I think we're about 6 months in at this point with our Findem the deployment. But yeah, no, the rollout's been very successful. I'm very pleased with the engagement from the team. And we've had great support and partnership from the Findem account team. But yeah, no, the initial results are very positive. So at a high level, we've seen great candidate quality, and we've reduced our time to source by 20%, which is a really meaningful metric. But again, coming back to this theme of ATS rediscovery, there were a couple of cool examples I wanted to share as I've sort of been digging through my data. So yeah, I mean, this year alone, there are examples of 2 candidates or 2 hires that we've made with candidates who had first applied to Box and were sitting in Greenhouse from 2017 and 2019. And yeah, I like to sort of joke that, like Ken was saying, if candidates apply that far back, first of all, their resume is just a snapshot in time, and essentially they're in cold storage, right? They're sitting there, And it's very, very unlikely, that they're going to be rediscovered. But yeah, again, through Findem and Findem's ability to kind of update their profiles and resurface them to the team, we were able to re-engage them this year, and we got them hired, which is really awesome. And another huge focus for us as a team personally was that a big focus at Box has been building out a big engineering hub in Warsaw, Poland, which has been a lot of fun, also very challenging. So for us, it was really critical to make sure as we tested the product that Findem was equally effective outside of the US. And so far this year, we've hired a bunch of software engineers in Warsaw, using Findem as the primary channel. So we're really thrilled with that, given how competitive the market is there at the moment. And we're competing against a lot of other big, well-known tech companies like Google, Netflix, and so on. So that was pretty cool.
Okay, great. I did see a question and a comment pop up, and we're going to get to some Q&A at the end, but one comment was just around the value of having super users on the team. Another was a question for David around, did he discontinue Greenhouse? No, this is in conjunction and partnership, the Findem and the Greenhouse partnership, just to clarify on that. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess last question, what's next for you and the team as it relates to transformation?
Yeah, well, I think we feel pretty good that sort of phase one of our partnership with Findem is complete, which is basically just rolling out the tool and getting people to use it. But yeah, no, we're excited that we feel like there's a lot more that we can still do, and that we're excited to do. And a lot of that revolves around Findem's CRM and campaigns functionality. So yeah, I mean, at Box, we've always tried as a TA team to think about how we can maintain a long-term engagement as a key part of our strategy with candidates. We like to sort of refer to this as our sort of talent flywheel strategy. The recognition that basically timing, I've been doing this a long time, and timing is often the most critical variable in the talent acquisition process. So, if you find a great candidate, but they just moved jobs or they just got promoted in their current job, and so they're just not interested in moving right now, you've got to figure out a way of maintaining contact with that person and making sure that they know who we are, and that when we reach out to them again, it's a warm outreach and they're going to be very quick to respond. So yeah, we were previously doing this in a pretty manual way, bunch of spreadsheets and a lot of just hard work from the recruiters. But yeah, no, we're very excited that Findem has this kind of functionality where we can really automate that process and make sure that the recruiters are sort of continuing to maintain touch points with a network of candidates that are relevant to them. This kind of long-term talent engagement strategies, I mean, it's hard work. It takes a lot of effort, and sometimes it can feel, like it takes almost years to see tangible outcomes, but it's so valuable if you can get it right. So yeah, we're excited to work with Findem on that.
Excellent. All right, great. I think nurturing, you touched a lot on keeping those candidates warm. They may not be ready today, but it's a very manual process as it is today to kind of keep in touch. And again, back to the refreshing and renewing the data, great combination between the two. So awesome insights. Thank you so much. I know we've got some questions kind of coming in from the group. I know we've only kind of scratched the surface based on the amount of questions coming in. So let me tackle a couple of them. We're not going to get to all of them, but I think we can probably capture them in the webinar and maybe reach back out and get some specific questions answered. So, okay, from our Q&A, I'm going to bring up the first one. NCAM, this one is for you. So tell me exactly how Greenhouse works with Findem.
Yeah, I could go ahead and jump in and answer that. Okay, so first of all, you're going to integrate via standard integration that we integrate with most of our partners, so via an API key. After you have the API key actually connected, excuse me, on the Findem side, you can perform searches. So you can perform searches for basically any candidate or prospect that's out there in the talent world. You can filter by a bunch of the different filtering characteristics there. Once you select a candidate, you can select them to be, or it's actually can be a group of candidates as well. You can push these candidates into Greenhouse as candidates for a specific job. So when I say specific job, Findem is also pulling data from Greenhouse to figure out, all right, what open jobs do we have here? So you can list those out within Findem and then assign those candidates to those jobs there. And you can go ahead and push them into Greenhouse for prospecting as well there. So that is like the base level functionality really there. So it's an extension of Greenhouse at the top of the funnel.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. This may be a follow-up question, another one for you. How is this different from Greenhouse's sourcing?
Good, very good question. So I think the biggest differentiator there is the time of the application for the candidate. Greenhouse is not going to go ahead and refresh and keep that candidate up to date once they've actually applied there. So when you're doing candidate rediscovery, like I said before, that candidate that applied for that software engineering position 3 years ago, that person has added 3 years of experience to their resume. They could have been doing AI, they could have been adding this skill set, they could have gotten that certification, all that. Greenhouse will not be able to today actually pull that new information out, but Findem can via its vast resources there. So that's one of the big differentiators there. In addition to that, as far as candidate search goes, if you take a look at Findem's filtering capability, like I said before, it has information particularly on the company that the candidate actually worked at, the candidate and prospect worked at. So the features that were put out, patents that were released, what was the size of the company? Did you go from Series A to Series D while they were there? That sort of thing. Greenhouse does not pull that extra metadata in as well too.
Okay, great. Lots of questions coming in. I'm thinking we may want to do a follow-up Q&A. Let me grab one out of the live. Do you have the activity feed from the candidate's previous interview history? And Ken, maybe one for you. So you can track the previous activity with the candidate within the system.
Yes. So if the candidate has the same email address, we do match on email. And for those of you who have used Greenhouse, whenever you add a new candidate, you do get the ability to say, hey, we've detected a duplicate here, and you can merge those candidates. And then on the new candidate profile, you'll be able to see the different jobs that they've actually applied to and see their history there.
Okay. And then there is also a question about what you just touched on, was detecting the duplicate resumes in the system. Is that driven off of unique email, or how do we do that?
That's email.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Thank you. All right. They're coming in fast and furiously. I think we'll probably take one more. I'll handle this one. So this is a question around cost. I saw several different questions. So the question is, do I have to pay extra for this? So as it relates to Findem, it depends on the capabilities that you're interested in using. So we have different packages. So if it's Rediscovery, we have a package for that. We have one for AI-powered sourcing, and we also have one for full CRM and pipeline automation. I think probably the most important thing to keep in mind is that you don't have to overhaul your ATS. You don't have to change your processes. It's really about adding intelligence on top of the systems you already have, like Greenhouse, so you can make sure that you're maximizing those investments that you've already made. All right. So I think probably we will capture these questions. I think we ought to probably plan for a follow-up with a group of people who have a lot of interest in this. I think I'm going to probably bring this to a close. So I'll say this. Thank you so much for joining. I'm hoping we gave you a new perspective on smarter sourcing. I hope what you're seeing is that you've got a lot of gold in the hills as it relates to the candidates that are already in your existing ATS. Matt's shown us, all the stats around warm leads and those that are closest to us, just driving incredible speed and ROI. We have something coming up called the Global Recruiting Innovation Challenge. So if you're ready to test what AI-powered sourcing can do for you and for your teams, we'd love to invite you to join this. It takes place on May 21st from noon Pacific time until 2 o'clock. It's a hands-on way to test your existing process against an AI-driven approach. So I think you'd find some very interesting things out during those sessions. We've got a QR code pulled up on the screen. I think hopefully we can drop the link into the chat and you can click on that as well. We will have the posting recorded that you can also replay for that information. So a huge thank you to all of the panelists and participants today. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for the great questions. Hope to see you on the 21st, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.